Is it possible that God will do miracles through people who don't seem to be so godly, people who don't seem to be so religiously scrupulous? This important question, I believe, is answered in this week's Haftara, the Haftara of Parshat Metzora. Indeed, it's Shabbat HaGadol, so we read a special Haftara, but the regular, so important Haftara answers this question on Parshat Metzora. You see, the redemption came to the Jewish people in the time of Yehoram, the king of Israel, who had been surrounded and besieged by Ben-Hadad, the king of Aram. And the Arameans had besieged the city, and it looked like they were all going to be starved. There was a tremendous famine. It looked like it was the end for them. And indeed, one of the officers, the Shalish, in the king's court, turns around and says there is absolutely no hope. Incredibly, 4 Mitzoraim, the connection to this week's Parsha, 4 lepers who have been isolated from the community because of their leprosy, decide to go out and see what is going on in the camp of Aram. And amazingly, a miracle happened. A thunderous noise was heard, and somehow the Arameans thought it was an advancing army which was coming towards them, and everybody fled, leaving all of their possessions, all of the food and drink ready for Bnei Israel. And amazingly, these 4 Mitzoraim lepers come and see what is going on. They cannot believe it. They go and tell the people in the city that salvation is here despite the famine and the siege, and a great deliverance was brought to the Jewish people. Says the Midrash, brought in Parshat Noach in the Tanchuma, brought by Rav Menachem Mendel Kasher in his great book Hatkufa HaGdolah on page 24, where he tries to put into perspective and understand the enormous miracles of the 6-day war. The Tanchuma says, you see, Mevasrei HaGeula, the people who brought the message of redemption were these lepers, these sinners who had been so distant. And more than that, the reason why the officer in the king's court thought that redemption could not take place is because this generation was so wicked, and indeed it was. How could it be, said the Midrash, that this generation would be relieved of its famine and its siege when they were such an evil generation? And the Midrash ends and says, indeed we see that the miracle can happen. Yavo hanes mikol makom. The miracle can happen in any way, and God's agents are chosen by Him. Ultimately, we live not in our world, but we live in God's world. And we have seen over the last 70 years of remarkable Jewish history, and all the way back to the beginning of time, that the most unusual and unexpected redemption happens to the Jewish people from the most unusual places. We live not in our world, but in the world of Hashem. Shabbat Shalom.